Bill McDorman is actually an incredible seed guy. He has so much passion and enthusiasm. And I always like to say he's actually like that at home. He's just this like, wow, I married an encyclopedia. And it's fun. It's actually fun.
Encyclopedias are exciting.
Well, in this case, it is, yes. So Bill has a very, very illustrious background in seed work. Went to Siberia and brought back Siberian tomatoes in '89. Has had several seed companies, been involved in several nonprofit seed efforts. Right now, he's a principal in the Great American Seedup.org online. And he's doing a lot of teaching with the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, having stepped down as ED. He's been instrumental in the Heritage Grain Trials program that the organization set up a few years back, and it's phenomenal. Anybody have any gut problems from the processed grains that we eat? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think you're going to cover some of that and share with us what the issues are with the grains that are being grown now, and the hearkening back to these ancient and heritage grains that are easier on bellies, that are fun to process, and actually taste better. So, Bill McDorman, everybody. Thank you.
Apologize for being late. I just did the Mount Lemon grinder.
Oh my God.
And it was gonna work, except the traffic on Oracle just kept slowing my thing down, so I apologize. So I want you all to get out of this what you came for, all right? That's the most important thing for me right now. We are in a bit of a pickle. Globally, I would say, with countries all over the world shortening their supply lines. You know, after like a ship got sideways in the Suez Canal, and about 80% of all the goods and services in the world were held up for a little while. There's all sorts of questions about what we're doing. And not only are people shortening their supply lines, but they're realizing if they do that around their food, they get healthier. It's better. Local food has become the big thing. And in my lifetime, we've developed this incredible local food movement. I helped start when I was in college, the farmers market in Missoula. And, you know, I think there were like 8 of us showed up for the very first one or something. And now there's like 14,000 people there every Saturday. It's become a major part of the regional economy. And that's, you know, same thing in Tucson and Phoenix and all over the country. It's become this incredible thing. But there's 2 problems with it still. This is where the pickle comes in. As Evan Sofro said to me one time when he came in, he was a young man that we hired at Native Seed Search to help us take care of the farm. And he came in one day and he said, you know, Bill, this local food thing's really great. He said, it's like the icing on the cake. He said, we need the cake. You know, so if you look at FAO worldwide or US, maybe up to 60 or 70% of everything we eat is based on grains. You know, I mean, some of that goes through the dairy and through the meat side of things, but it's what you grow to get about 70% of our food. And local grains just weren't part of that whole thing. And the other thing is that we don't have any local seeds for our local agriculture. Almost Bill and I, starting the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, we traveled thousands of miles the first 3 years, all over the Western United States, went to every farmer's market we could and asked every farmer, you know, there's not very many farmers at a farmer's market, at least in smaller places, to actually grow food. But if you find those guys and go ask them, where do you get your seeds? They all have the same answer. Surprised, shockingly, it was Johnny's Selected Seeds. That's in Maine. And there are rumors now that 70% of Johnny's seeds are contract grown in China. So they're part of that. They're on the container. Right? So that's sort of why I'm giving this kind of a talk here today and wherever I go, is that because I think that gives us huge opportunity. Now, Tucson in particular, in Arizona in general now, is way ahead with the grain thing. I mean, we have a long way to go. There's nobody could argue that. But I just spoke with Dr. Rich Pratt at New Mexico State University, who just this summer got some grains from us and is trying. And he told me we're doing an online grain school right now, a 10-week program. We have 50 students from all over the world, and he was one of the professors. The Zoom things turned out to be really cool because you can get these people to come in. And the first thing he said was, if I could only live in Arizona, you people are 10 years ahead. And I said, well, it's probably only 9 because we were there. The first year we were at Native Seeds, and I have to give the credit where it's due. It was Dr. Gary Navin's idea. And he got together 6 disparate sort of people. Duncan was a grower from down in Patagonia, and Jeff Zimmerman had just bought Hayden Mills. And Don Guerra was part of that group. And we got a USDA grant to grow out white Sonora, and brought us to and got the idea working and worked through a lot of the economics and all the other stuff we had to do. Anyway, that planted a seed that has blossomed today we just stopped by BKW Farms here in Marana. And last time I talked to Ron Wong, I said, how you doing, Ron? He said, well, we're doubling our acreage again this year. He said, we just sold thousands of pounds container, 1,000-pound thing of white Sonora to somebody in New Jersey. And if you know Ron, he's kind of humble. He goes, I don't know why anybody would ever buy white Sonora in New Jersey, but they are. And so, that's part of that story. And then, Don Guerra was in the New York Times this past week with his Chinese face of changing. It's just coming back to reclaiming our own story and our own place and our own grains. And so what we've been trying to do is get this going in the whole Rocky Mountain region, from Canada all the way down to the southern border. And so how do you get started? You go, oh yeah, it's a good idea. 70% of what we eat, is become so industrialized that if you go talk to the people at the universities growing grains, they're going, this is going to be over soon. Beer is especially suspect because almost all the barley is grown in a 4-state area from eastern Oregon across southern Idaho into southern Montana and Wyoming. Man, the climate change vectors for diseases are off the chart. They're getting huge rains in the summer when they never got them. It's just a mess. And you can see this with all of them. And yet they metronomically go on every year. I met Dr. Juliette Marshall, who's head of the Idaho barley and wheat trials. And they're very systematic. They trial 100 varieties every year. It's really impressive. You can go see. And they do it in about 13 different locations around Idaho. So I went to the one in eastern Idaho and looked at it. And it's an incredible amount of work you can think about the labor. And they've got the machinery to do it. And it's all lined up in those little squares or whatever. So after, it was over, I said, so Julia, are any of these varieties going to survive the next 5 to 10 years? And she goes, none of them. They are all so genetically similar. Why? There's only 2 buyers, InBev AB and Miller Coors. That's who buys it at all. And it's almost a monopoly. And they have such narrow requirements for protein and falling weight and all the things they need. All the farmers are just scared to death that they could grow something and they don't have a market for it. And there isn't a market locally yet in most places, except for maybe Tucson. Right, so that's just how important that is. And I just want to emphasize something that has always made sense to me after I met Dr. Ken Meter of the Crossroads Center in Minneapolis. You can Google these sorts of things up. But he came to Southern Arizona and did an economic study of agriculture here. And what he found out was that from Phoenix South in Arizona spends about $2 billion a year on food. Okay, 96% of those dollars leave the state. It's like 96% of the food we eat comes in from somewhere else. And about 96% of what we produce in Arizona goes somewhere else as a raw commodity. I mean, that's what I was thinking about economics when I was studying Latin American history. That's the definition of a 4th world country, right? That's just what it is. And that's what most of our rural areas, they'll tell you. They're living that way in poverty anyway. So what Dr. Meter figured out was that if everybody who buys food shifts $5 a week into local food, whatever it is, support your farmer's market or what, $5 more than you're doing now, that would shift $300 million into southern Arizona economy per year. When we were here, they were trying to do that big mine, right, just south of here. Remember, the big promise for that was $400 million one-time hit, right, to threaten the aquifer. And we could all change that overnight, right, with just $5. Think about how much you spend a month in food if we started to shift it all. In fact, he's got graphs from the Great Recession in which counties in the United States that recovered first economically. And we may want to think about that as there are predictions we're kind of teetering in another bubble of sorts. The counties that recovered first had one thing in common. They had the most local food. That became the driver of dollars that got passed around all the way through their economy. So this isn't rocket science stuff. And then I'll just mention a few things about health. In the gut thing while I'm here, and I'm going to go back and tell you what we did at the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance to give you some ideas about how we can make this work even better with the grains. And then I've got a bunch of grains that I grew, and I'll talk about that. So we did a series of grain stores. One day, Gary had a gentleman come to Tucson, part of his graduate program. He would do that, and then he would call me at Native Seed Search and say, "Hey, Bill, I got this great guy, and do you want to put on a public event or whatever?" So Glenn Roberts was coming to town from Anson Mills, and they were about 10 years before Tucson in doing a mill to grow local grains. He helped start the Carolina Golden Rice Foundation. So Glenn walks in, who's one of the most brilliant and incredible people I've ever been around. I just listened to him in this presentation for about an hour, and this light bulb came on. I looked at Gary and he goes, "Grain school." We were doing seed school then. We go, "Grain school." And so we started doing these grain schools. And those have continued on to the online one we're doing today. But for 3 years, we were at Colorado State University doing it in conjunction with them. And one of the professors there had gut problems. So she took advantage of there being a grain school there to get data together every year to give to us about gut problems and modern wheat and what is causing that, what's going on. Why do we have, it's not just one aisle now, it's 2 aisles of gluten free in some of the big, this is a major problem. And as mothers will tell you, if now when they talk to their mothers didn't have to make up a diet list when they had an overnight for kids, right? The only way to have an overnight now is to get the diet restriction list, right, from all the kids. We didn't do that. We just everybody ate the same food and nobody was talking about gut problems. So something's changed, right? So turns out that, when I was there, there's a couple of things that are going on. No smoking gun yet to show exactly what is causing the problem. But there are some generalizations now that have been observed with millions of iterations. Number one, the farther back you go into the ancient grains. So if you get out of these modern varieties of InBev, AB, and Coors once, and get back to heritage grains, what we lovingly call the land races, things like Red 5 and Turkey Red, even for the hard red wheats and make great bread. They're bread wheats. And then move back even further into the Emmers, which have been around for 10,000 years. And we eat all the time still as semolina. Those are pasta wheats. And then you go back even farther to the most ancient grain. I've got some up here and I'll show you, is Einkorn, which is actually just a wild grass. And so, their New York Times last year had a story about a 14,000-year-old archaeological site that and showed that they were making bread, was unleavened bread and this thing, and it was Einkorn. And you go, wow, that's like 10,000 years before recorded agriculture, right? People were gathering Einkorn and making bread out of it. So we still have that. And so if you go modern wheat, land races, the Emmers, back to the Einkorns, all the way down that spectrum, the more you go, the less gut problems. Just something that they're observing. Einkorn's a completely different food. It's a different chromosome structure, 40% protein, way higher in vitamins and minerals. What doesn't it have? It doesn't yield as much. our whole thing has been on yield for dollars. So, but that's the transformation that's starting to happen. One of the other smoking gun that's emerging was glyphosate. And almost in places like Montana now, up to 80% of the bread wheat is sprayed with glyphosate just before it's harvested, because it'll boost the yield like 2 or 3%. They can get it out of the field. They can dry it down if a storm's coming or whatever. And there's so much you go, well, if the farmer wants to do that, it's his thing. Let him do it. But a good friend of ours who, Bob Quinn, who is the originator of a product called Kamut, which is actually an emmer. It's an ancient wheat, right? And the story is an Air Force man in Egypt, was stationed in Egypt in World War II. 1949, he's going home. He's done his tour of duty, walking through the market in Cairo, and there's baskets of grains and all this stuff. And he sees this wheat with kernels 3 to 4 times larger than he's ever seen. And he grew up on the wheat farm in Montana. And he's going, what is that? And he goes, can I have some of that? And the guy, literally 32 grains he put in his pocket. I think last year, Bob Quinn, 140,000 acres of kamut's being grown in Montana of that 32 grains, and it's going all over the world. It's in every breakfast cereal now almost, right? So Bob Quinn, part of his 100,000 acres of it now is going to Europe, right? He gets to the docks for the EU, checking it in, and they go, Bob, we got a problem. We just tested your kamut, and it's above allowable tolerances for glyphosate. And he's going, no, test it again. He goes, I know every single one of my growers. We're a family up there. I've saved so many farms because I can pay them so much more for this because they're growing organically. And last time I was in Montana, it was 10,000 acres or get out. If you didn't have 10,000 acres, the scale was beyond you now, except Bob Quinn, right? And Senator John Tester is one of his growers. In fact, I saw Senator Tester speaking. He said, thanks, Bob. You saved my family farm. That's the only reason he's still in business. So, Bob, he speaks with authority. He says, no, nobody is spraying glyphosate on our wheat. So they tested it again. Sorry. So what he found was that Italy had a higher tolerance. The EU tolerance is really, really low for glyphosate. So Italy was just a little bit and it worked. So he was able to save had it shipped to Italy, and that was okay. Then came back, University of Montana State. We got to figure out what's going on here. It's in the rain.
Oh my God.
It's in the rain. If you want to know the scale of what you're doing, if there's a reason to switch to local and heritage grains, that's it. Let's get the rain back. That's, it's just mind-blowing the effects that we're starting to have on things. So anyway, when we tried to take this energy that we in this ball rolling here through our grain schools through Colorado, everybody had the same question: what do we grow? Where do we get the seeds? And so to answer that question, what we did some research, and we found a series of USDA bulletins. From the best one that we found was 1929. It's a taxonomy of wheat varieties. United States, 1929. And it's got maps with dots showing where and lists of the names of the grains and how much acreage in each county. And so if you get a couple of these and put them together, you can, wherever you live, you can get a list to start with 10, 20, 30 grains that were, think about this, growing in 1929, largely before the later large irrigation projects. So they had to be more drought tolerant and no chemicals. They were organic. Wow. That's where we start. So then we go, where do you get the seeds? Well, it's almost impossible to find them. So it turns out that the USDA grain storage laboratory in Aberdeen, Idaho has a lot of grain, but they're understaffed. They were cut, sequestration, and it's kind of a tough deal. And so when you do get them out, they send you 50 seeds. So we're kind of like, okay, let's get started. So we go, we're not going to be able to do this ourselves. So let's get as many grains as we can. And by then we were hooking in with different people at similar climates all over the world that were starting to talk about this. And we're getting their grains. And lots of times just a little bit would come. So we started with 50. If you plant 50 grains and you pay attention, you can get a pound. And if you plant a pound, you can get 100 pounds, 50 to 100 pounds. So within 3 years, we're scaling up. So now we've got about, I don't know, last I looked, 192 grain trials, trying 250 grains in about, I don't know how many locations, and all working on the same thing. And the idea is that we send seeds out, and if and when you can, return twice as much to us if you can, and then that way we'll give them out to other people. And that's something that we implemented when we were at Native Seeds Church. That's how Sonoran really got going. It was really funny. I got the kids, I call them, from Avalon Gardens, who were part of the first grain school, came to me and said, Bill, we want to buy 400 pounds of white Sonoran. This was like a year after we got the program, and we'd already had at the farm in Patagonia, we had our first harvest. We had 400 pounds. We had more than that. And they're looking at me, and I'm trying to think about what to do because one plays 400 pounds, you know. And so I finally looked at him and said, no, not going to do it. Not going to sell you 400 pounds. I'm going to give it to you. And if and when you can, you return twice as much. Deal? And they're going, one of them got out of thing. Yeah, Masasine, that's about 1/40 of the crop we'd have to return. And he's going, okay, deal. And what I realized in that, and I think this is something I'm learning about gift economies. You know, when you just sell something to somebody, transaction's over. They walk away with the grain, I got my money, that's it. But when you do, you give it with this, man, I was invested in making sure it worked. And they were invested in making sure it worked so that they could give it back. So actually, I forgot all about it. Native Seed Search director is way too busy, you know, trying to run a farm, a retail store, a mail order company, and $1 million nonprofit, and manage $1 million building. You know, where do you get the skill set to do that? You don't. You're just bouncing like a ping pong ball on the thing. That's how it was when I was there. So I forgot all about it until it was about a year and a half, almost 2 years later. It was just before we left. I get a call from Jeff Zimmerman. And he goes, Bill, we got the truck out here. We got 5,000 pounds of Sonoran wheat. Where do you want it? And I'm going, 5,000 pounds? And he goes, yeah, that was your 400 pounds. And you were too busy. So we took the 800 pounds and gave it to another farmer and then grew it out. And they just want to give you 5,000 pounds. And I'm going, this is how we can do this. There's a little story in there. And this is what's happened all over the place. So I'm really hopeful about what's going on. There are some counter things that we need to look at. The amount of seed, both our vegetable seeds and especially in the grains that are being patented, is starting to grow from mid-scale farmers, particular. You know, in fact, there's a new moniker at the University of Washington. They call them their no-grow varieties. And I thought, and it's proud. It's a symbol they put on their bags of grain or whatever you get. This is the land grant university. Just use public money to do research on grains. But if you want them, you can get grain from them, but it says no grow. So what does that mean? It means that you are contractually obligated never to grow seed from them. You can grow the grain out and you can sell the grain, but you can't reproduce the seed and give it to your neighbors or sell it or do whatever. And this kind of thinking, you know, there is no innovation without privatization. For the guy at the United Nations. And I'm going, what? It's like, here we are 10,000 years later with this huge food system that was created by people that didn't know who Mendel was, right? Saving seeds from whatever they were growing, wherever they were, from what they liked, adapting it to where they were. And you're saying there's no innovation unless somebody can patent it? So I just want you to be aware of that. 46% of the lettuce varieties now in Johnny's Selected Seeds catalog are patented. These are certified organic varieties, and that's one of my pet peeves. Is I don't think organic seed should be. They should allow to do that because that stops that adaptation. That stops the gift economy that I just talked about. Native seeds. That's how we're going to get this to work. So if I have one thing, one message at the end is grow a green. I have never, besides my spectacular wife on here, I've never been so in love. If you haven't gone out to your garden and given your Tibetan purple barley a hug, which is tall and beautiful, that's a 1,000-year-old heirloom treasure from Tibet that grows in Arizona like you can't believe, on almost no water through the winter. I mean, it's just, and so people go, oh, scale. Yeah, I don't have a combine, I don't have a big thing. Throw all that scale bullshit away. We've been washburned. You can grow enough for 7 loaves of bread on 100 square feet in your backyard on a deep bed. Dr. Ralph Bush teaches at the Air Force Academy, did that data. He used to come to Colorado State University for a green school every year and present. He makes all his bread, pies, and cookies on his grains that he just gardens in his own backyard. My God, when you get a sickle or a scythe and you get back into that whole culture and you start cleaning them again, I think it's primordial. There's just something so satisfying. So we all need to garden grains. And if you don't have room to even garden, get a pot, and I'll give you some black and tan Einkorn seeds. Put a couple of seeds in the pot. You can grow it wherever in your trailer, on your deck, whatever it is. Grow me up one. You'll get maybe several hundred seeds. So I'll give you 3 or 4. You can turn that into 300 or 400 and send them back to us, and we'll give them out to other people. We can all take part in doing this. And my guess is that once you grow one of these things, you'll find more. The community garden, you'll get your neighbor, there'll be something going on because they're just too beautiful. And I'll just end by saying, so this is Einkorn. This is the most ancient grain. So we know, at least they documented 14,000 years ago people were eating it, and maybe before that. Eli Rugosa was just in Georgia, where there's still families growing things. And in eastern Turkey, there's still wild Einkorn fields. The grass is still growing there. And the story is that a family of 4 could go out for 2 weeks into these wild fields and gather with a basket. When it's ready, they would they hit the heads into baskets and gather enough grain for their family for the year, doing 2 weeks worth of work. I don't know how that pencils out economically, but that sounds pretty good. But somewhere along the line, somebody saved some of those, brought them home, and that actually started agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. We don't have civilization unless we get, involved with this. And so the problem with Einkorn and why Emmer, that came later, and then the modern wheats especially, had one really interesting characteristic. They're what we call free threshing. So what does that mean? So the original Einkorns, when you shake the heads, you thresh them, and the seed comes out, the seed still has a little hole over the top of it. And it's just really hard to get off because by nature, you get more diversity as you go back. So there are different sizes and whatever. We have de-hulling machines that'll rub those holes off. But you could lose up to 30 to 40% of your crop. The people that we know that have been doing this, they feed to the chickens. It's just food for another system, but you don't get as much of the grain. So since I started growing, I love Einkorn. I love making bread out of Einkorn. It's just a wonderful thing. But this is a big barrier for me at home because now I got to do something else. I got to get a de-huller to figure this out. And lo and behold, last year, somebody somewhere in Europe, and it came into somebody else, and then it came into our network, that black and tan Einkorn is free threshing. You would think after 14,000 years there'd be a genetic anomaly and somebody would, and it turns out there's others now. So we've heard of another one. And so we're looking into that. My new latest grain that I'm falling in love with is Spelt, which is one of the oldest of the modern, what we call the modern wheats. And I'll break some of this off if somebody wants to taste it. Spelt, Spelt combines the minerals and the protein and the flavor of the ancient wheats with the baking quality of the modern wheats. I've never had a loaf lift this much of Einkorn. It just comes up, and the flavor's incredible. The problem with Spelt, it's not free threshing. Almost all Spelt has holes. Until about 2 weeks ago, a packet landed in my mailbox. Now we're hearing about free threshing Spelt. So that we're on the ground floor of this whole thing, people. We get to reinvent a whole new agriculture. And I think that's our job. And I think that in 1,000 years, somebody's going to look back at us right now. 10,000 years it took to create all this diversity. It's incredible. There were 30,000 varieties of wheat being grown in the United States in 1900. Commercially small available wheats. Right now we have 4 genotypes going at all, pretty much 99%. So we lost all that diversity. And here we are sitting right here. And we're figuring it out. Ooh, we're going to do this. We're going to get the cake, right? We're going to get our own seeds. So we don't have to worry about China to get them. And so I think in 1,000 years, people are going to look at this, and they go, you know those people in the pinch? The genetic pinch where we are now? 2 generations, we threw away all that diversity and got away from it. A few people woke up and they go, you know what's important? Early 21st century. What should I be working on? Right? So a few people have looked beyond the big screen, distractions, right? And the dogmatic religions that we have, we get really dogmatic, in my opinion. In the political world, the bullshit and the strife or whatever, and you can jump down that rat hole and spend all your energy. Or you can take some black and tan Einkorn and plant it and help us expand this again and help them be adapted to where you live again, right? And so in 1,000 years, somebody's going to stand up in a garden like this with their homemade wine, and they're eating their homemade bread that they've just milked fresh, and they're going to go, here's a toast to the people of the pinch, because you people figured it out. So thank you for having me. I'm open for questions, and you can taste. And I've got samples here too of some of my favorite grains, so you're welcome to take a packet. Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance is just a nonprofit. It was actually started because a woman goes, didn't you work at Native Seed Church? She goes, I want a Native Seed Church for the whole Rocky Mountain West. So that's where so it actually birthed into the idea. And so it's just a small nonprofit. We've got 5 employees, no building. We train 10 times as many people on a 10th the budget that we have at Native Seeds, because that's what we really think is the most important thing right now. You know, it's all important. You guys are so lucky to have all the institutional and all the other support you have here. But that's what we're doing, trying to get, Lander, Wyoming, growing Einkorn. Try that on. So, and there's some basic seed saving books. Seed saving does not have to be a mystery. There's an easy, this is the breadcrumbs into the dark, scary forest. And the idea behind it was that we need really complicated rules around breeding seeds and saving them if you're a large-scale industrial farm. The uniformity, the predictability, the germination rates, there's all these things that you go get your degree, But if you're a home gardener, what's the worst thing that happens if you have no idea what you're doing when you seed your seeds? and you make a genetic mistake. It's not true. It gets crossed up somehow. What's the worst thing that happens? You get to eat. Usually, pumpzinis, broccoli. In fact, that's the system that created all this diversity. We did that. Small people all over the planet for 10,000 years. We're the innovators for it. So that's all we have to get back to is having fun in our own gardens and saving whatever happens. So that's really, so if you want a guidebook, all the stuff's in there to help you do that. So anything else? I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Bill,
Judith, yeah. Yes.
thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this. And I didn't know much at all about what you're talking about, but you made it so that I could really understand and ingest and not use the garden as a farmer. But here's what I'm wondering. Have you presented or been featured on Arizona Illustrated so that the word can get out?
No, I think what will happen is that, Don Gary, has started Barrio Grains, which is a nonprofit. And he's going to have a really exciting announcement about a grant soon. And so he is just that smiling face with a loaf of bread, I'm going off into the sunset. I stepped down as director of Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance even. And because what I'm learning is the young people that are coming up, they're smarter, better, faster. They don't know where to go yet. And so I'm sticking around to help, keep them from going way off the tracks. And so if somebody wants to call me and talk, I go almost, she'll tell you, I go almost anywhere to teach or to talk if I'm asked. But I don't go look for that stuff anymore. And I don't have to anymore. I don't feel like I need to push. That there's enough stuff starting to happen among the people. So, what I'm doing right now is setting up a system so when people want these 250 grains, they'll go out that week. The different packets and that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
but how does this get disseminated to other people who would love to know, but they don't even know about it yet to ask?
Well, what's happening? Here's what's happening so far is that the National Garden Survey a couple of years ago, they survey all the gardeners in America every year. We used to use Gallup or whatever. This is a national association. So what are gardeners doing? Who's gardening? Demographics. What are they spending their money on? What are they doing? And a couple of years ago, there was a shocking anomaly that nobody had ever seen. 6 million new millennials took up gardening in 1 year. And so you double click on that. Go in and see why that is, right? Yeah, they got sick. They went to their doctor, and we get enough doctors now going, I don't have any medicine for that. You're going to have to change your diet. So then they show up at Whole Foods, and they get paycheck shocked, right? They go, I can't afford this. So somebody said, well, why don't you grow some of it? And they start gardening. And then if there's a good, community gardens and native seed searches and other around, the word starts to get out. And now we've got seed exchanges and seed libraries. There's 500 seed libraries now. Since we started the first one in Arizona when we were at Native Seed Search. 500, think about that. That's more than the SDS had in the 60s, right? As far as campus organization, we're talking major radical restructuring of what's going on. So it's happening. So what I tell people is, contact your local. Justine, you guys are it's so easy here. In Cottonwood, we've got somebody new in charge of the library, and they're just getting up to speed. And but yeah, that's kind of how it's working. So I hope that helps a little bit. But thank you for your kind words. I just don't do this, and so as I do it more and more, and I would encourage all of you, this has to be a grassroots movement. Nobody's coming to save us. There's no way to get the diversity we're going to need to face climate change from an institution. They don't have the money. The 1,100 Seagar gene banks, the bubble, they collected it all and saved it, but we have to grow it out. Who's going to pay for that? I mean, we went through that at Native Seed Search. Last time I did a budget for it, there was $13 million to take the Native Seed Search collection back out and grow it again because they died after a while. So is that an efficient use of our collective $13 million of Tucson's energy? I don't know. In the Rocky Mountain, we don't even have an institution. So the only thing that makes sense is get as many people doing it as we can. So how do you do that? We've got over 220 graduates now from our seed school teacher trainings. We give all our information away, we model it, we set up a week-long program where people can practice. So be seed teacher. If you can't figure it out, figure out how to say what you know about it, how it affected you, be honest, and then just know where to point people. We've got all sorts of stuff to point people to, and keep doing it. And so if I sound like I know what I'm talking about, that's all. I just lived in the States for 35 years. I still don't know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Is there a way to use some of the traditional grains to eliminate weeds?
Yeah.
That instead of getting herbicides or whatever, the grains can push out the weeds.
Yes, they're naturally good at that. See, what we lost, and Gary Navin would say, Dr. Navin would say that Arizona really never had a small-scale, family-driven agriculture like you have in Maine or Vermont or up in the upper Midwest, or even in Mexico, where the Pueblo peoples, and they were just never taken over. The only agriculture in Arizona was either way back the Sonoma, and they were growing agave, Lord knows what reasons, or it's industrial ag. And so when you raise that question in Arizona, those people go, "Oh, it's a big problem. How do we fold that into our big industrial crops that we have now that we need to make money?" And that's happening in the Midwest. There are farmers that are making really incredible no-till, grain rotations. Almost every great agriculture in the world history has had a grain rotation somewhere in it, for weed control or something else. What we need to do, and that's why I hired this man, Evan Soffero, the Native Seed Search, we need to invent a whole new agriculture. We don't have it yet. Is it going to be waffle? Is it going to be, what is it? A combination of all of that with Steiner and, we've learned a lot as humans. How do we grow our own food in the most efficient and beautiful way that tells us a story that we want to hear? I don't know how to do that yet, but grains are going to be a part of that. At least in my yard, they are, and I say that's how you start. I keep expanding, and I only have, I woke up the other day, seeing how much work I'm doing or whatever. It's like 6 or 7 good gardens. I turned 67, 75, maybe 80. How long will I be able to garden?
Yeah.
I don't know. But so go home and do it yourself. That's the message. This has to be, it's biological. More people do it, grow these grains where they are, more diversity, more adaptation, more resilience we'll have in the communities and economic. So,
Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate you sharing with us your knowledge.